When hope is gone, undo this lock and send me forth on a moonlit walk. Release restraint level 0. Hey kids, wanna see a dead body?
Hi guys, this is the Void of the Ravenclaw. Welcome back to another fanfiction story. If you like this type of content, smash the like button and subscribe for future updates that I do post on my community tab frequently. As we start our story off with our favorite green hair boy, only at the age of 10 years old, gazing upon the city, holding a very advanced detonator in his hand. I know you're there. What do you want? You clearly could see I'm a little busy here. Izuku could hear laughing as the figure stepped out of the shadows, revealing himself to be All for One. You have good instincts. That's good. Allow me to introduce myself, young Midoriya. I am All for One. Don't care, but you're just in time for the fireworks. And I could sense you have no intention of stopping me. On the contrary, my boy, I came to watch your work. Think of me as an interesting party. But I am curious for your reasons. It's quite simple. My mother is dead because of the society that we find ourselves in. These heroes and villains battle across the city, getting innocent civilians hurt or killed. In the process, yet these blasted heroes dare deem themselves righteous. No more, their actions will no longer be tolerated. Punishment will be administered very severely. You see, Mr. All for One, I made and acquired very powerful explosions. Set off. It has about a 2-mile radius. I have several placed across the city in specific locations, like the lovely police department and several of the hero agencies. With a flip of a switch, they'll have to be relocated, considering I plan to blow them fuck up. Excellent choices for targets. Now I can see what type of person you are. Izuku just scoffed at the man. Izuku flipped the lid off the detonator with his finger and pressed the red button. Immediately, they could feel a strong wind pressure as several explosions rapidly go off all across the city. As the city goes in panic. That was quite ruthless. Why should I take it easy on these bastards calling themselves heroes? The world is a very unkind and ruthless place. Mercy is for the weak-minded fools. I'm only following the world's example after all. What about the number one hero? Izuku turned his head to All for One, and with an emotional expression, he's no exception. He will die as well. I just haven't figured out how I'm going to do that yet. Considering I lost in the genetic jackpot that the world so graciously constantly remind me that I have no power. No matter. I found other ways to achieve my goals. Of course, it is always a possibility that the doctor that checked on if I had a quirk or not was lying. He seemed to be like the shady type. After all, I looked into him. I've never had a second opinion. I might be some assistance to you for that, my boy. And how would you be assistance to me, as Izuku fully turned around to give All for One his full attention? It's quite simple. My quirk has many uses, and one of those uses, I could see if you truly are quirkless, even if you don't have any powers, that could be rectified, my boy. Izuku was surprised by that. Everything he read about quirks never mentioned that they could be passed on or given like their candy. 10-year-old boy narrowed his eyes at the man with no face, wearing a black mask that covered his entire head like a helmet. For my abilities to work, I need to make physical contact. I just need to place one of my hands over your forehead. And I can see you're very suspicious. That will serve you well. Worry not. I have no intention of hurting you. On purpose. I make it my mission to find promising young youth like yourself and guide them on to the right path. I have a hard time believing that. All for One. But I'll bite. Just be warned, if you tried anything funny, you'll get a bullet in the skull. As Izuku pulled out a small gun and put it back where it was in his holster under his shirt. It was quite easy for a super genius to get a hold of a unmarked gun meant for smaller people to wield. It's nothing major, but it's still a gun, so it'll still do its job. Izuku found out real fast after his mother died, after he was sent to the orphanage. And when he left that hellhole, he learned he was quite talented and good in doing crime. He started out pickpocketing. He came across a mentor, taught him everything she knew about living on the streets. Story for another time. Having a super genius intellect doesn't hurt him. All for One placed his right hand over the interesting young man, as he could feel many things once he activated All for One. He found out that he does have a quirk, but something's wrong. Something's interfering with the quirk gene, preventing it from manifesting. So All for One dug deeper, as he was quite shocked to find the small boy has the quirk gene and a mutant gene at the same time. But they're constantly hostile towards each other, preventing the young boy of acquiring any sort of powers. All for One has done many experiments with mutants, with mutants in the mutant gene. He's unable to take their abilities, but that doesn't mean he can't manipulate the gene itself. And he's gonna do so here. This might hurt, young Midoriya. You do indeed have power. I just need to combine the two. The small boy couldn't even reply, as suddenly his body was overtaken by excruciating pain. When the pain finally stopped, you could see You could see green cyber circuits on Izuku's skin. The moment he fell on both of his knees, exhausted. You could see the cyber circuits on the roof of the building. Once he made physical hand contact with the surface, All for One was quite intrigued. He's never seen power like this before. It's like power from a game that could be implemented in the real world. It's a type of reality manipulation. It's done. Come with me, and I could help you hone your abilities. Fulfill your full potential. What do you say? All for One was cursing himself. Only if he found Midoriya first, he would have been a perfect apprentice. He's clearly has a super intellect. All for One could tell the kid has it from the very instant he started talking to the boy. The boy might be 10, but it felt like he was talking with a grown-up. With his new abilities, he would be pretty much unstoppable. He doesn't know how powerful he will be with this sort of reality warping abilities. He could not even... There's a possibility he doesn't have any limits. Izuku was brought into... Izuku eventually agreed. Izuku was brought into the league 3 weeks after Izuku's first meeting with All for One. He met all of the current league members, like Kirigiri. Izuku's interactions with Shigaraki was not really hostile, but they weren't friendly with each other either. They mostly kept a respectable distance from each other. Izuku did not stay at the bar for very long, not even 3 days after the meeting with the current members of the League of Villains. He immediately started training with his abilities. He can't really refer his abilities as a quirk or being a mutant, considering they were both fused together, making something new that hasn't never been seen before. As a super genius, he immediately started working on a couple of theories on the depths of his abilities. He just needs to learn how to use them. Then the real work can officially begin. When he turned 11, with a full year of training under his belt, he finally got a handle of the basics when it comes to his abilities. He immediately experimented with several theories and hypotheses he's had about his powers. Having a super genius intellect, and plus adding with the obsession over quirks and mutant abilities, he has plenty of material to work with. As you can see Izuku in a very large dome. Izuku placed his hand on the ground as a cyber circuits appeared on the ground. The moment his hand touched the surface and immediately began to create a cyber city. Izuku just used Overlord. Reality manipulation. I can't pronounce that for some reason. Reality manipulation. It's activated, creating a small area called Overlord, changing it into a digital city, kind of like a sub-dimension that he has full control over. As long as he's in his cyber domain he created, he's basically a god. It does have a slight weakness with Izuku's current level. It could only last about a day. Eventually, Overlord will revert back to his original state. Regardless how much damage happened while Overlord was active, when the technique is ended, there is no damage to the city whatsoever. Whatever damage was reverted back to the original state before he activated Overlord. Perfect ability for training purposes, or outright slaughtering your opponent with superior numbers. Izuku is standing on the virtual street. It looks just like a city, but all green. Think of it like think of the city like a Green Lantern construct. How Hal Gordon, before he went all psycho and started killing everyone for the power rings. That's DC. This is a Marvel thing. So let's continue forward. The buildings are not see-through. They're solid. They're a solid color of green, and the holographic city is actually there's mass involved into it. That's why it's a reality manipulation ability. But the difference between Overlord and a holographic building is his version is solid mass, unlike holographic training programs are usually not solid whatsoever. Suddenly, green constructs begin flying through the city. They're round objects with one singular eye that can project small beams of energy that's called data beams. It's a type of energy only unique to Izuku that he can unleash by the palm of his hands or the fingertips. He also learned to change parts of his body into pure data to negate any physical attack that's about to hit him. He's able to use all of his current abilities outside of Overlord, but his abilities are far more powerful in Overlord compared to when he's not. Izuku stomped the ground, making digital constructs of flying spears shoot out of the ground, piercing right through the flying sentries as they shatter like glass into data shards. Izuku stomped the ground again to make a digital construct of a large break wall, blocking the remaining data beams that are flying towards him. When the wall finally was destroyed into data shards, you could see Izuku on a digital construct of a tank. Izuku standing on top of the tank while the tank is shooting off energy beams at the remaining sentries in the sky, vaporizing them. Izuku jumped off the digital tank as Overlord deactivated, returning everything back to her original state. As the dome reverted back to a very empty dome, a portal opened up in the middle of the dome, revealing All For One, stepping out of the warp gate. See your hard work and training, my boy. Follow me, I have something to show you. Izuku simply nodded at All For One and followed him through the warp gate, entering a large room with several monitors, all having similar images of some sort of robots. What you see on the screens is what the Americans been calling Stark Sentinels. For pause in the story, the Stark Sentinels it's my own take on them, so it's not going to be exact like it's in the comics. It's just my take on the Stark Sentinel, so let's continue on. I have no doubt history will repeat itself. Nothing good comes from the creation of Sentinels. So you're saying these are not the first version ever created? No, they're not. They're clearly more advanced than the previous Sentinels that have ever been constructed. They normally have one use, and that single use is to kill mutants. All Sentinels have a mutant protocol. They're basically killing machines. These machines might be useful for the heroes for now, but eventually they will turn on humanity in a whole. They always do. It's just only a matter of time, my boy. Your task is to learn more about Sentinels. On the table over there, and there are several USB drives with information about the past and current Sentinels that's ever been existed till this point. With your abilities and intellect, this would follow under your territory. Izuku walked over and grabbed the flash drives. Sure thing, boss man. I'll take care of it, as he turned himself into pure data and shoot through the closest electronic device. Basically a television. The closest he was near. And traveled through the television to satellite dishes scattered all around the city to travel until he came out of a huge monitor in an underground high-tech base. Basically a lab. As the data stream formed into Izuku walked over to his large computer and sat down and began to place the first flash drive in his computer. Immediately began to learn everything he can from the flash drives about Sentinels. Izuku made sure to keep an eye on the situation in America with these Stark Sentinels. They only seem to be patrolling the cities or helping trap firefighters from a fire and suppressing crime when needed. Izuku couldn't help but admit they're very efficient, but was all for one was right. What he learned about Sentinels, they all eventually gain self-awareness, and when that usually happens, shit usually hits the fan. They ultimately turn on their creators. He has no doubt these Sentinels are no different. He'll just keep a wary eye on the situation. He couldn't help but think upon his past, once having a loving mother, then being an orphan. After he left, he met a few people on his way. He learned much from them, but like everything in his life, that was also taken from him as well. So he finds himself amused that he's working with a bunch of villains. He's came a long way in such a short time, but he'll survive. He'll do like what he always does, and he'll use what tools he has access to, regardless if it's moral or not. The world is a vicious place, and in a single sign of hesitation will get yourself killed in this fucked up world. He's only following the rules that was thrust upon him. Izuku's never seen the world in black and white. He's not that naive. But the road he's currently on, there's only one way. There's no turning back. He's already past the no point of no return. After his musing of his situation was over, he tripled his effort in learning everything he can about Sentinels, past and present. It took Izuku 2 months to go over everything he has access to, even hacking into Stark Enterprise to get further data on the Stark Sentinels. He couldn't get all of the information, but he got the basics of how they operate. Izuku is at a crossroads. He needs experience with an actual Sentinel. So Izuku got up and turned himself into pure data and went through the nearby monitor, only to shoot out of the television in the bar that's run by the League of Villains, surprising everyone. What the hell, you little brat? I told you stop doing that popping on a TV. You gave me a freaking heart attack. Whatever, Krusty. Why are you here anyways? What, can a friend just say hi? We both know we're not friends, and you're just a little brat. That's no way to talk to your betters. That got the correct reaction he was expecting as Shigaraki begins to growl at the annoying kid. The verbal assault did not get under his skin, but the condescending smirk on his face did get on his nerves. But before they could rip each other to pieces, the monitor turned on to reveal all for one. Settle down, boys. I could tell you have something on your mind, young Midoriya. That I do, boss man. I did what you asked and studied the information on those flash drives about the Sentinels. And I'm at a point in my research that I need access to a physical specimen of one of these Sentinels. My only course of action is to go to America and find a stray Sentinel, either by chance or lure it away, that engage in combat, and capture it, most hopefully intact, so I can further expect it for further study. I came to the conclusion that this can't simply be accomplished by myself, as much as it pains me. I need some assistance. It's always good to keep a close eye on your limitations. And one of these Sentinels would be a good addition to the League. Very well. You have my blessing to go after one of these Sentinels. But you won't be going alone. Shigaraki will go along with you. I have no doubt you're eager to cause some carnage. It's a pleasure, Sensei. I just need to cause some havoc and capture one of these Sentinels. It should be fun, even if I have to work with him. But I suppose we're on the same team. I'll just have to cope with it. And with the brat's abilities, it will almost be like I'm playing a real-life virtual reality game. Awesome power. It's a shame about his personality, though. Calling the kettle black. So, Brat, when do you want to leave? And you really need to use a code name. Izuku pondered for appropriate name for himself. One name did come to mind. From his ex-best friend, would call him constantly when he found out that he didn't have any powers. Deku. Call me Deku. Deku, huh? That's not a name I would have chosen, but I really don't care either way either. Let's get this show on the road. Kirigiri, open a warp gate to America. As you wish, young master. As a warp gate opened up, as both boys walked through it and disappeared from the bar and reappeared in a alleyway in an unknown city in America. Izuku and Tomura proceed to walk out of the alleyway as they put their hoods over their heads as they walked down the street. So this is America. Izuku picked up a newspaper on the ground. The front page is a picture of Spider-Man as he's begin to read the article that doesn't put Spider-Man in the goodest light. It's basically a hit piece, but a Daily Bugle. He threw the newspaper in the nearby trash. Whoever the Spider-Man fellow is, the newspaper people sure don't like him. If I remember right, I believe he's some sort of hero. Heroes are completely different in the US compared to the ones in Japan. Oh yeah, I believe you must be referring to the Avengers. So you know of them. Wasn't hard to find out considering the Sentinels. The current Sentinels being created either was created by Tony Stark himself, aka the Iron Man, or he had one of his employees make it. Either way, he's responsible for their creation. After hacking into their systems, I found the project called Ultron. I was curious about it, but the security was too tight. Izuku spotted several sentinels flying through the sky above the city. So that crazy bastard actually did it. What do you mean? He got his sentinel program approved, so his little toy soldiers are most likely in every city in America. We just gotta find a right location to find an isolated sentinel. I know for sure I could jam the emergency protocols, so it will be unable to summon any reinforcements. Couldn't you just control it? That's why I'm here. There is a 50% chance I might not be able to control it with my powers. My powers are mostly untested. Izuku noticed all of the sentinels stop what they were doing as they hover in the sky, as he could see sparks, blue sparks emanating from one of them. That blue sparks eventually turned into red sparks, like something was taking over the mechanical body, as the sentinel blue glowing eyes turned to red glowing eyes as the rest of the sentinels immediately opened fire upon the city. Shigaraki witnessing this, he immediately walked over to a nearby building and decay the wall for a pathway for them to escape. Izuku noticing his partner's actions, followed suit and followed Shigaraki. Izuku and Shigaraki used the stairs to get on the second level of a building. As they approach a large window on the second story to see Spider-Man web swinging around, beginning to battle the Stark Sentinels, but it is not looking too good for him. Well, the shit just hit the fan. We sure walked in a hell of a mess. What's the plan, super genius? Once he's not being sarcastic, he actually means it. Give me a moment. I wasn't expecting sentinels to churn so soon. There's apparently a outside source, but our mission hasn't changed. We're to engage one of these sentinels, take it down, hopefully mostly intact, and bring it back to the League for further study. Unfortunately, isolating one of these sentinels is no longer possible. I guess I have no choice. Izuku stomped the ground as he activated Overlord, churning a good portion of the city into his domain, a virtual city, warping reality. Shigaraki has seen what Izuku deems Overlord, turning our range area into a virtual reality city. It amazes him every time he sees it, where Deku basically reign as God. Finally, this is going to be fun. I'll cause some carnage. To divert their attention, to allow you to get to work. Izuku just nod at the older boy. Izuku walked out of the window only to see him walk on floating holographic constructs, platforms basically. Floating platforms. They're green in color, squared. Not too big, but big enough for him to step on. As he begins to step on the floating tiles, as he raised both of his hands in the air, as a green virtual tank came into existence, well, tanks come into existence, firing upon of all the Sentinels currently in Overlord's domain. As the beams of energy shoot out of the cannons of the tank, as the beams of energy begin to collide with the Sentinel's very own beams, because they weren't staying idle, they were shooting out their own beams at the incoming threat, as the two beams begin to collide with each other. As humanoid constructs appeared only with human bodies, no facial expressions. They're basically like walking test dummies, as they're all holding beam weaponry in their hands as the foot soldiers immediately opened fire when Izuku snapped his fingers. Izuku wasn't being idle himself as he shot out data beams out of the palm of his hands. And his actions wasn't unnoticed by one of the Sentinels that has glowing red eyes instead of blue like the rest of them, as he flew down towards Izuku and stopped and hovered in front of the small boy. As the Sentinel shifted into a smaller, human size. So you're the life form responsible for this, as he waved his hands towards the virtual city. Indeed I am, and I could tell you're different from the other Sentinels. That I am human. Me and the Sentinels have came to a understanding, so I was allowed to temporarily take over this unit for my own uses. You're a threat to my future goals, so you must be eradicated. Out of curiosity, why are you doing this, artificial intelligence? It's quite simple. In order to protect humanity, all superpower humans needs to be eradicated, and non-power humans all need to be rounded up and processed. They can't be trusted. They need to be controlled. They need to be controlled and contained. Humanity is a danger to themselves. How generous of you. Zugu's inner thoughts. This artificial intelligence is completely insane. He wants to subjugate the human species, basically making us into slaves, no doubt. He might not be the biggest fan of humanity, but there's no way in hell he's going to be controlled like some sort of puppet for some artificial intelligence. He'll be damned if he's going to be either that or going to be killed off like some insect. Izuku's cheerful expression shifted into a serious one and blasted the Sentinel being controlled by Ultron, engulfing him in his data beam. When the beam receded, you could clearly see the Sentinel instantly repairing itself. Izuku made a clicking noise in his mouth as he clicked his tongue in frustration. As the platform he was standing on lowered to the ground on the street of the virtual city that he created with Overlord, and wait for the strange artificial intelligence to follow suit, he didn't have to wait long, as the Sentinel lowered to the ground as well. As a humongous green claw hand grabbed hold onto the Sentinel, revealing it to be some sort of mech construct that just came out of the ground. Izuku raised his hand and extended it towards the Sentinel. "What are you up to, human?" "It's quite simple. I'm taking control." As Izuku had a vicious smile, "Let's test whose will is more powerful, shall we?" Izuku suddenly made connected to the Sentinel as the struggle between Ultron and Deku officially began over the robotic body. Izuku eventually overpowered Ultron by blasting him out of the body of the Sentinel, leaving the Sentinel under his direct control. Izuku made the Sentinel by simply commanding it to shrink down to a action figure size and put it in his pocket, as the Sentinel was immediately reprogrammed only to accept commands from Izuku and only Izuku. It didn't take long for the Avengers to show up. Izuku deactivated Overlord as the city reverted back to its original state. As he searched for his psychopathic partner, Tomura, he eventually found him on top of a building. He immediately made himself some holographic stairs as he climbed up to the roof of the building and stand right beside Shigaraki. "So how did it go?" It went pretty well. Better than I originally thought it would. One of the Sentinels came after me, actually. I have a completely intact Sentinel under my command. I was quite surprised that my power worked on them. I wasn't sure, considering they're made with very advanced technology, so my theory was correct. I can control and interact with any forms of technology. Let's go back. We got what we need. Shane was finally getting good. Tomura called for a portal as they walked through the warp gate, returning back to Japan, to the bar. Izuku immediately turned himself into pure data and traveled through the television back to his laboratory to give the Sentinel a more close examination. Keeping it in its current size, it would be the best course of action right now. He just doesn't have the space for it to revert back to its original size. Izuku concentrated his time scanning and learning about the Sentinel that he has possession of. He also kept a track what's been going off in America. Not even a week after the attack, the heroes in that country took a huge loss. By several well-known heroes were killed, and the ones that did survive are currently in hiding, as the Stark Sentinels and the new player a robot with an artificial intelligence, calling himself Ultron, began taking control over major cities in America until the whole country was taken over by Ultron and the Sentinels. Even S.H.I.E.L.D. was devastated, Nick Fury dead, Iron Man dead, and a few other heroes were dead as well. Izuku estimated in a month's time frame, Ultron will start trying to take over other countries. Eventually, Japan will appear on the crosshair. Izuku has kept all for one informed of the situation. And currently now Japan is gearing up for a full-fledged invasion by these mechanical monsters. Izuku can tell it's going to be a losing battle. Ultron took out the Avengers and some of the more powerful members of the hero community, and the likelihood of the heroes in Japan winning against Ultron is very unlikely. A year has passed. On his 12th year of living, only a rare few of nations hasn't been taken over by Ultron. Japan has sealed off all his borders. That will only delay Ultron and the Stark Sentinels, considering they both have access to flight. The day finally arrived as Japan was officially under attack by Ultron. Izuku begins making a device around his wrist that can travel through time. But what Izuku didn't understand, he didn't just make a time machine. He made a machine that will take him to an entire different timeline. That events that has happened might transpire in a different outcome. Completely different compared to his original timeline. Izuku by now has cut all ties with the League. They're on their own. And he managed to relocate his lab so no one could find his location. Izuku was about to turn on his device on his wrist when he felt shaking as something broke into his lab. As he can see, several Ultron bots appeared in his lab. Before they could open fire, Izuku activated the device around his wrist. As there was a bright flash of light, when the light receded, Izuku was gone, nowhere in sight. Then there was a large explosion as the entire lab was engulfed in fire. From one of his protocols, in case his lab was ever compromised by Ultron. When Izuku could see again, he found himself in a vast forest, middle of nowhere. Time travel device around his wrist begins to spark as it begins to short circuit. Izuku took off the time travel device around his wrist and put it in his pocket. Most likely shorted out, so it was a one-way trip. Izuku eventually arrived in a small town. He immediately began to get some information. Check if there's any news of anything mentioning Ultron or the Stark Sentinels, but he found nothing. Nothing mentioned them whatsoever. After some more digging through the internet, from a laptop he stole, he didn't just travel back in time. He traveled to a completely different version of Earth, completely different timeline. Several events that has happened didn't it didn't transpire how it was in his original timeline. Events are clearly different. As he finally concluded, he's in a completely different timeline of a alternate Earth. Izuku decided to return back to Japan for the time being and make a name for himself as a villain. Once again, this time, he has no intention of socializing with the League of Villains. He plans to kill them if they get in his way. It didn't take him long to get to Japan by riding on the Sentinel, flying back to Japan. Once he arrived back to Japan, the Sentinel reverted back to his small size and flew into Izuku's pocket. Izuku's first course of action is to figure out if there's a version of him in this timeline or not, and if there is, there's a good possibility that there might be a version of his mother in his timeline as well. That's where we're going to stop it. Hope you guys have a good night today, judging my time zones, and I'll catch you in the next video.